Earthbound spirits. Earthbound spirit is what we call a soul who has become trapped in the negative dimension between the third and the fourth dimension. Their body has left the third dimension, but they were not able to transition through the fourth dimension where they would have left their emotional and mental bodies behind. Instead, something has created them to freak out, and a negative portalway has opened and vacuum sealed them into a tiny dimensional space between the third and fourth dimension. Once they become trapped, they are also stuck with their emotional and mental bodies, as they didn't get to let go of them when transitioning. So this means that they are trapped with the same emotional and mental pain they had while incarnated. Now this means they are not only trapped in a hellhole of a dimension, but they're also trapped in their own emotional and mental hell if they had emotional and mental baggage when they died, which most people do. To survive this space, they must access vital force energy, and this becomes the only point of focus from this point on. They are able to draw on vital force energy from the fourth dimensional aspect of a place or person. If they are drawing vital force energy from the fourth dimension of a property, that means they are using the property that is generating enough vital force energy from the occupants so they have enough emotional and mental charge to live on. This will only show up as an attachment to the property if you are doing a property clearing. If you are doing a negative energy removal for a person and they have an earthbound spirit, ghost or poltergeist attached to the property and not them, if you are in their Akashic Records, you are not going to be told there's a ghost, earthbound spirit, ghost or poltergeist attached to the property. You actually have to have the property record open to find what's attached to the property. So please don't think that if you're just doing a clearing for a person that you're able to find out and clear what's going on for their home as well. You must have the home, the house address open and be doing a clearing differently in the Akashic Records based off that property. So you are not able to find what's going on for the property if you've got the person's records open and vice versa. So that's why it's really, a great combination to do the property clearing course and this course. So you're able to do the whole matrix of the person and the home. So there's no, sort of transference of other energies happening. So that's really important to understand, that you can only find what's attached to the person or the property of the records you have open. Now, the following attaching mechanisms for a property will be the same for both earthbound spirit, ghosts, and poltergeists. So I'm going to just quickly look at the attaching mechanisms for a property for ghosts, earthbound spirits, ghosts, and poltergeists. Attaching mechanisms for a property. Number 1, attaching to the property that they lived in and are attached to emotionally. So sometimes people are so attached to their house. Sometimes people have lived in the same house for so long and they're so attached to it. And sometimes they've even built it with their own hands. So they can get very, very attached to their home. And if somebody gets trapped in between the third and fourth dimension, sometimes they'll naturally just attach to their property because they hold so much attachment to that space. So that's exactly where they'll attach to. Number 2, they can attach to the property of their family or loved ones. So if they have attachments to their family, they can actually just go looking for them and attach to the property of their family or loved ones because it feels like a safe place to hide. Now, but this can only happen if there is excess emotional or mental charge going on within the home, such as grief, depression, or fighting. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to hold enough charge to live on, and it would then attach to one of the family members instead. But if someone dies and doesn't cross properly, and if they're not already attached to a home, they might just be attached to loved ones. So if somebody gets trapped, they might freak out and instantly go looking for their family and loved ones because it's such an emotional charge. There is a thread there, so they can follow that thread. And if they come to the property to say they've got, their daughter lives in a property with her husband and some children, and they find the property, if there's enough grief going on because of that person's crossing, or there's fighting and depression and all sorts of lower sort of energies going on, that trapped soul might attach to just the property because there's enough emotional and mental sort of food in the property grid to just attach to the property. So that's what they will do if there's enough emotional mental charge in the property grid. Now, if there's not enough, they will then go and attach to maybe the daughter. But if there's enough charge in the grid of the property, I usually find these things will just attach to the property if they can. If there's not enough food in the grid, they'll have to attach to a person. But if they can attach to a property, they seem to prefer that because it's not attaching to one particular person. But like I said, if there's not enough food in the grid of the property, they'll have to attach to a person. Number 3, they can attach to a property that has dysfunctional emotions or thoughts generated within it, such as a family with lots of stuff going on and lots of fighting and depression, because not only will it hold enough charge to live on, but it's also a way of attaching without being noticed because the property has so much unharmonic vibration going on anyway. So basically, if a trapped earthbound spirit, ghost, or poltergeist, if they haven't got a property they're attached to, and if they don't go and attach to a property that they've had attachment to, or if they don't find loved ones to attach to their property or attach to them, then sometimes they will just go searching for any property with enough emotional and mental charge to hold them. So sometimes they'll just come across a property that may have a lot of fighting and depression or lots of sort of emotions charged into the grid. And if that property holds enough spark in the grid, these things can find that pretty easily because that static charge is kind of a loud beacon for them, because that means they can kind of come in and attach to something that already has an unharmonic charge, and they won't be felt. They can kind of come in and hide in amongst that already unharmonic frequency. So it's much preferred for them, obviously, to be in a space that they're not going to get picked up, but also has enough charge to feed them. So that's another reason why these earthbound spirits, ghosts, or poltergeists will attach to a property. If they can't find something else to attach to, they will look for people or a house or a property that they don't necessarily know the people, but it has enough emotional charge to live on. Now, if they're going to be drawing vital force energy from a person through attachment, this means they are attached at the 4th dimensional level and are using the emotional mental charge to live off within the energetic mind and emotional grid of the person. So it's different to being attached to the property. Now, if they're attached to a person, it means they're actually attached to the 4th dimensional aspect of them, which is their emotional and mental body. So they're attached to the person at a 4th dimensional level, but they're attached in their energetic mind and emotional body grid. And this is a personal attachment. So it won't be found on a property clearing if it's a personal attachment on a person. You must have their records open. So let's have a look at the attaching mechanisms for a person. Now, number 1, attaching to a family member or loved one if they hold enough charge at the mental and emotional level, such as grieving for them or being angry that they've died on them. So if somebody has got trapped while trying to cross, I find that if they're going to attach to a person, what naturally and normally happens is they will attach to a loved one. It's much more easier to find because they still have attachments to people, so they can follow that emotional kind of thread and find the person quite quickly and easily. So if the loved one who's been left behind is grieving or angry that the person has died, then there's enough emotional and mental charge for the trapped spirit to attach to that person, that loved one. And there's enough emotional and mental receptivity to be open to that attachment. So I find that if I find an attaching spirit on someone, most commonly it's a loved one who's who has been trapped crossing and has chosen to attach to them. Number 2, attach to the first person they come across within the fourth dimensional landscape who holds enough charge within their emotional mental framework that allows a vibrational match to happen. So sometimes if somebody has been trapped while trying to cross, and if they haven't got a loved one that's, you know, kind of an easy attachment, or they haven't got people who they're that attached to, if they're trapped and they haven't got somewhere to go looking, they will just quickly scan the fourth dimensional landscape. And in that space, if somebody has a high emotional mental charge in their emotional mental grid, then these things can kind of see the spark and the charge around the grids and the energy bodies in the fourth dimension. So it's kind of like an electricity that holds a frequency that is very, very much easy to hone in on and find if someone's holding a highly emotional and mental active grid. So these things will, if they haven't got someone already to go and attach to and loved ones, they will sometimes just scan really quickly and find the closest person who has this active emotional mental grid going on, and that is enough for them to be able to attach. Number 3, attach to an animal if desperate, but the animal would have to be in a disempowered state already to allow the attachment, so maybe sick, weak, or injured. So sometimes if a trapped soul is really desperate for vital force energy, and you know, they can get quite desperate in between the third and fourth dimension, because that, like I said, it's really static and there's no vital force energy in there, and they're always feeling like they're starving for vital force energy. So if really, really desperate, they will attach to an animal, but I find that the animal has to be in a weakened, disempowered state, and that's not usual for an animal. But I do find that some animals have, like, you can find dogs that are naturally more timid and that aren't really in their power. So animals can naturally be a little bit more timid and not in their power. So they would be more of a focus for this type of energy. Otherwise, if they're injured or sick, that disempowered state, that bit of vulnerability would be enough for one of these to attach as well, just to get enough vital force energy. They wouldn't attach for long, but they would attach for long enough to get a little bit of vital force energy before trying to scan for something better. Number 4, can be attached for lifetimes if there has been a binding, cursed, pact, spell, vow, contract of some kind, or if the person has given permission for the attachment. So this is the other attaching mechanism that can allow spirits to attach to somebody. I find that sometimes when somebody has made a binding or a pact with somebody while being physically incarnated, if somebody dies and they've made like a full-on pact with somebody to never leave them, or they have some other stuff, contracts or stuff going on, that can be so solid that it is like a massive energetic cord. So when one of the people in the pact, to say it's a pact, 2 people make a pact to never ever leave each other, and it's so solid, it's so firm, there's an energetic cord that gets made. And if one of those people die, then that soul isn't able to do its transition process, because that cord would have to be cut. So that cord is so strong that it actually doesn't allow the person to go through that transition process, and instead traps that soul in between the third and fourth dimension, and allows that soul to continue to be trapped and connected and attached to that person. So it would be then become an attached spirit, who then will stay attached for as many lifetimes as necessary before that cord is finally cut. So these things can be very deep, like contracts, vows, like what we say with our words and give emotional charge to can hold for lifetimes. So it's really important to know that, you know, when we make promises and commitments, it can carry for lifetimes. So just to be aware of that. So it's really, really important to know that, you know, another thing that I find that will attach somebody, it's an attaching mechanism for an earthbound spirit, ghost, or poltergeist to attach to someone for lifetimes, is sometimes if someone's cursed someone, and if that curse is so strong, that can be an attaching mechanism as well. So it's very, very intricate what can cause us to attach to someone for lifetimes and not transition properly. So these things, you know, I don't find like really common, but occasionally I'll find somebody has an attaching spirit, and when I go and have a look back to kind of how long it's been attached, and I go back and it's like, oh, it's been attached for a few lifetimes. And then if I go really deep and follow the thread really, really carefully, I'll be able to find if it's a curse or a pact or a vow or some sort of contract, I'll find that point of attachment, and it can be mind-blowing. You know, when you have somebody who has, you know, made a pact, I'll just use an example. A guy came to me who had been suffering for like most of his life, as long as he could remember, with all sorts of issues when it came to, you know, other men, and he just couldn't feel safe in friendships with other men. He had anxiety around it and all sorts of other stuff going on. Anyway, the energetic root cause to it was he still had his brother from a few lifetimes ago attached to him, and in that lifetime when they were both incarnated together, they were in a war together. They made a really strong pact that they would not leave each other and they would not go home without each other. And it was so deep. I still got goosebumps thinking about the charge of that. It was so deep. They loved each other so much, and they were so committed to bringing each other home, going home together, that when his brother died and he was there and he left, that didn't allow his brother to cross. He was so committed to that pact that he got trapped and had to attach to him. Now, over lifetimes of carrying his brother as an attachment, he just couldn't feel. He was so scared to get close to other men, to have friendships with other men. He was so afraid of that commitment and the reason was because deep down underneath all of that, his soul was kind of still suffering the consequences to making such a deep and loving someone so deeply to make that pact. So it was interesting to see how it was playing out in his life after lifetime. So, and after clearing his brother from that lifetime and clearing up some of the stuff that kind of, you know, went along with that, he just, within I think 3 or 4 months, like the difference in his life, the difference in his friendships, the ability to hold, you know, connections with men without feeling the anxiety and all sorts of stuff. It was just amazing to see how this can work and how it can impact people. So it's really, really beautiful to be able to do this for someone who has had a spirit attached for lifetimes. The results in a person if an earthbound spirit attaches. So once an earthbound spirit attaches, it normally just wants to live without causing too much problems, especially if attached to a loved one. But it depends on the person because they are still carrying around their emotional and mental issues. This means that they could act just the same way when they were alive. So an overcritical mother who gets trapped and then attaches to her daughter will still be very critical mother who feeds strong opinions into the mental grid of her daughter, and then the daughter will pick up on those thoughts and feel like she still can't shake off her mother. I've had clients say, I feel like she's following me around all day and telling me what to do. So it's really quite fascinating because, you know, when someone's supposed to transition properly, they're supposed to leave their emotional or mental body behind in the fourth dimension. But the souls that get trapped, they don't get to leave their emotional and mental body behind. They take that into the trapped dimension between the third and fourth dimension. So while they're a trapped soul in there, they are also still trapped in their emotional and mental body as well. So if somebody's had a really good life and they've been happy, when they get trapped, they're going to not want to create too much drama. You probably won't notice them too much. But if somebody's been very critical and angry and, a bit nasty their whole incarnated life, when they get trapped, they're still going to be very critical and nasty. They're not going to change. If anything, it's going to highlight and get worse because there's so much chaos in that confused, gross space. So, it's almost like whoever the person is going to get highlighted. It's going to exaggerate their shadows. So sometimes, people can have a mother or father attached to them, and they will feel like they cannot escape this person, that they are still feeling them being critical and nasty because they're feeding all that still into the grid. So it can be amazing to have, come across a mother who's still attached to her daughter. This has happened recently, and she was just so angry and critical. She was really, really angry and critical, and she was constantly, telling her daughter what to do from this trapped state. So, and because the daughter was always in a state of anxiety and feeling like, she just couldn't get rid of her mum, and felt guilty as well because she didn't want her mum in her head and had all this conflicting energy. So her mother was actually being fed quite a lot from all of that energy because she just couldn't have a rest herself. Like, the daughter could not have a rest from the critical mother. So once the clearing was done and her mother was crossed properly, it was so beautiful to feel the mother finally let go of that fourth dimensional aspect of herself, because then when she hit the fifth dimension, it was like her soul shined through, and all the love and the sorry and it was just beautiful to have that moment where the daughter could feel the truth behind her mother, the love, the compassion, the support, and not just the fourth dimensional aspect of her that was just angry and critical. That wasn't really her. She was damaged. She was emotionally and mentally traumatized as a child herself. So she had all this emotional and mental baggage, but it wasn't the truth of who she was, and she was never able to express the truth of who she was because of her trauma. So it's really amazing and beautiful when you finally get to allow that soul to let go of, their fourth dimensional aspect of themselves, especially when it's hiding who they really are, and allow them to transition properly. So it depends on the personality of the trapped soul and what relationship dynamic is still playing out if they are attached to a loved one, or what vibrational tone they are still vibrating. If a nasty person gets trapped, then the chances are they're going to be nasty, and they're going to be in a nasty attachment. The only thing they all have in common is that they will be draining the person slowly, and after a while the person could end up with low energy issues. Some people can have earthbound spirits attached and not know, or others can tell something is going on right up front, and they're actually almost sure that it's mum or dad or Auntie Sue that's hanging off them. So some people might not know they have an attachment because, it might be just draining them slowly. Other people just know. They just know that their mum or dad or, like Auntie Sue is in the room and attached to them. So there's different points of awareness, and I definitely find that it depends on the personality of the trapped spirit, how much that affects the person. Some people that are trapped, some souls that are trapped do not want to create any drama or waves, and they'll very, very carefully use this vital force energy they need to survive without creating any too much interference. Others just feel like they're damn well inclined to walk on in and create drama and be critical and, you know, tell people what to do. You know, like some of them just feel like they have the right to. So it depends on the personality. So earthbound spirits cannot hibernate. Earthbound spirits, ghosts and poltergeists, they just can't hibernate. It's not possible. There's no hibernization possible for them. They're constantly stuck in that in-between dimension, and there's no rest. So they're constantly having to find enough vital force energy. So they can't hibernate, but they can be attached for lifetimes, like I said, as long as the attaching mechanism is still there. So, you know, if they're attached for lifetimes, then there's an oath or a contract or a pact or a binding or, you know, like a curse. There's something binding them. And until that attaching mechanism is dissolved and like cancelled and deleted, until that is done and the imprint taken out as well, and like all life lessons, like, you know, there's a checklist you kind of have to do. Like there's this checklist I'm going to show you that you have to kind of do to make sure it's severed. And once that's severed, then the person can go on and move on without being attached. So definitely not hibernate. They can't hibernate, but can be attached for lifetimes if the conditions are right.